Alright guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how I went from this image to that image in Photoshop. Alright guys, my name is Philip and let's jump right into Photoshop. So this image was actually not too difficult to process. It took a while, but when you deal with colors then it just takes a while. So let's just get started. So first thing I want to do, there is a lot of blue in the sky right here. So I want to change that just a little bit by creating a hue saturation layer and going, instead of the master, going down to the blues like so. I'm just going to increase the blues to whatever we feel like, really. Let's actually do it to something like that. Why wouldn't we? And the reason is I kind of like the purple in these parts of the clouds, and we can add more color later to that part. So let's close that, and as it is kind of a layer mask here anyway, I'm just going to hit Command and I on my keyboard, which will invert that, so now everything is invisible. And with a large brush, by hitting B on the keyboard, making it a bit larger like so, and with an opacity of maybe 40%, I'm just going to bring that in by painting with white on that layer mask. I'm going to bring it in just in the sky, and maybe a little bit of these mountains in the back there. Okay, that's not bad at all. Maybe do something like this. Most likely it won't look exactly like the one I showed you before in the introduction, because whenever I do something twice with colors, it looks just different. Alright, so that's not bad. I like that. Let's also darken up that sky, right? I mean, it was kind of a sunset, so the sun was somewhere in the upper left corner right there. So let's do that. Let's create a curve adjustment layer and just drag it down, to something, maybe to something like that. Wouldn't look too bad. We're gonna have to see how it looks in the end. We're gonna change colors and stuff anyway over and over again. Hit Command and I again because we don't want that everywhere. Or what we can just do, we can click or hold differently. We can press Alt on the keyboard, click on the layer mask we have just created before, and drag and drop it onto our new layer. And then we can ask, and we got asked replace layer mask. We're gonna say yes. So now we have the exact same layer mask. So the effect is visible in the exact same area as the one we had just done before. Okay, that's nice. So now we could theoretically add a little bit of more color to the whole thing, especially maybe here. Maybe a bit more purple would be nice if we consider that this here will be red. So why wouldn't we do that? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new layer by hitting Command, Alt, Shift, and N on the keyboard. So now we have a new layer right here. I'm going to hit G on my keyboard, which in this case, unfortunately, brings up my gradient tool. As you can see here, I'm on the left side. So what I will hit instead is Shift G, which will then bring up my bucket tool. And the bucket tool is exactly what I want. Now I'm just going to get a nice purple color. It doesn't really matter which color we get anyway. Maybe something like that. I'm just going to paint that color in there. I'm going to change the blending mode from normal down to either hue or color. It always depends a little bit what looks better. And in this case, probably I'll go for hue. And then I'm going to decrease the visibility of that a little bit in just a second. So before we adapt it, let's check actually if we do like that color. So what we can do, we can just create a new hue saturation layer and clip that to the layer we have just created with the color. So we can either do that by hitting Command, Alt, and G on the keyboard, and now you have a little arrow pointing beneath, or you just click the little symbol right here, which does exactly the same job. So every adjustment we make here will just affect the purple layer we have just created. And now you can easily change the color of that layer, just like that. Just slide the hue slider around a little bit until you feel you have found something which you actually like. So in this case, how about maybe something like that. I'll never know. Let's just maybe a bit lower, something like that maybe. All right, let's see how that looks. So let's hit Command and I on the keyboard, but first we have to create a layer mask to do that. So let's go back to the layer which has the color. Create a layer mask by hitting the little Japanese flag symbol down here. Hit Command and I on the keyboard to hide everything. And now we're just going to bring the effect back in areas where we actually like it. I'm just with an opacity of, say, 10%. I'm going to pop in this nice purple color, whatever it is, into the areas right here. Just make it a bit stronger than it was before. Not too much, but not too little either. Maybe something like that. Okay. I could maybe bring it back here a little bit more and maybe a bit more there. And why not here a little bit more? Okay, I kind of like that. That doesn't look bad at all. Cool, so now let's get a little bit of red in there, right? And considering that I remember, because I was there, the sun is somewhere over here, we may as well put the red just here on that side so that it kind of fades out in a darker purple later. So the way to do that is just go on top of all the layers you have, create a new layer by hitting Command, Alt, Shift, and N. And again with G, now just G, not Shift G, because the bucket tool was the tool we selected at the last, which we had. You know what I mean. don't judge me on my poor English today, it's late. So I'm going to select a nice orange and just again fill that layer with color, just like that. So once we have filled that, we can decide, first of all, of course, we're going to do it, we're going to change the blending mode again back to hue, and maybe this time I'll make it visible first and then I'll decide on the exact color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a layer mask on that, and I'm going to hit Command and I to invert that layer mask, get my brush, and now with white and a bit of a smaller brush, but again an opacity of 10%, I'm just going to bring back that nice and orangey color here in the areas back here. Okay, so remember, we want to simulate that the sun is somewhere in the back here, and that the kind of effect of the light fades out into this direction. And if we have to do it a very strong kind of orange here, we are just going to do it. Why would we not? Okay. Okay, let's make it a bit smaller, and also just going to go once or twice maybe over here to make it blend a little bit nicer. And I'm going to hit X on my keyboard, which means I will paint in black. I'm going to hide the effect again, just a little bit where I find it a bit too strong, maybe here. Okay, well, I think I can live with this, for now, at least, anyway. So let's see what we can do next. How about a little bit more blue? Because you know, normally you have something like yellow, then you have a bit of red, and maybe a bit of purplish in there, but then at some point, when you go far enough away, there might be some blue in the sky as well. So, some darker blue, I mean. So we could theoretically try to insert that. So, same principle again. I'm going to hit Command-Alt-Shift and N on the keyboard. That's Command-Alt-Shift and N. And as usual, the shortcuts will be down in the description of the blog and the video, wherever you watch. So, new layer, hit G on the keyboard to get the paint bucket tool, and now we're just going to grab a nice blue. I never know which blues to use. Let's just use the brightest blue possible. Yes, that's just awesome. Okay, let's change the blending mode to hue again. And I'm going to invert a layer mask, which I created right now by hitting Command and I on the keyboard. And now again with a nice and big brush and an opacity of 10% and a white brush, I'm just going to bring that blue color just a little bit back here in the distance. Okay, so I want it to feel a little bit colder the further away you go from the sun. That is of course a personal preference. You can do whatever the heck you please when you do these kind of things. Okay, I kind of like the color combination. It's fancy, and it doesn't like the stuff I'm doing. Of whether you like my images or not is not the point, but the techniques apply to anything you want like to do. So if you want to change the sky and make it to something which maybe doesn't look too real, but still is just pleasing for the eye, then just freaking do it. Who's there to stop you, right? Okay, good. So the next thing we should do is probably work a little bit more on the lighting situation in the image, and if we wanted to, we can still change the light later, but for now, I'm actually kind of happy. So I'm going to create the levels adjustment layer. I'm just going to play with these sliders here and see, once I have reached, especially for the sky, a light situation which I like. So if I just drag this midpoints here a little bit towards the right, I think I kind of like what it does to the cloud area, especially over here. So that's not bad at all. And let's just continue and see what we can do for the grass in the foreground. And I also like that. Okay, that's not bad at all. So I'm going to do something like that. Go to maybe 0.6 or so. That's of course depending on your image. I'm going to close that. I'm going to invert that by hitting Command and I on the keyboard. And now again with a relatively large brush and an opacity of 20%, I'm just going to bring back this darkness we have just created, especially in the sky, to something like that. Okay. But also in the foreground, I'm going to go over the whole thing once, just like that. And then I'm just going to go alongside the edges of the image. Let me zoom in a little bit and go out there, something like that, to make sure there is some bit of, like a, maybe call it a vignette, a very, very soft one, right? Okay, we're going to work on the ground later anyway, a little bit more. So that's just for now to give the first impression of how the image will look once it's done. Let's go once here. Okay, I kind of like that. Good, we have done an amazing job so far. We can be proud of ourselves. Okay, now we could again work on colors if this is what we feel like. For example, if we wanted to, we can make the grass a little bit more green. So we can just create a new hue saturation layer, go to the greens, and if you want to make sure that we actually have all the grass selected, we can just increase both hue and saturation. Everything which takes a crazy color is what you have currently selected with the color selection you can see down here. You can widen that selection just by moving these edge thingies here a little bit to the left or to the right until you feel happy. Let's do something like that. Then you bring it back to a more or less normal state, and then you can change the color of the grass essentially independent from anything else, because that's what we had selected, right? So if I felt like a red grass, which is actually kind of cool, That's actually really cool. Well, okay, but in this case, I'm going to go for a bit more green, I think. Maybe something like that. Okay, that's not bad. Let's look at the before and after. Yeah, he's a bit flat, and here it looks a bit more fresh. That's not bad. Cool. Okay, now so that works. Now that we have done that, I think it might be time, I'm sorry, to work a little bit more on the different areas in the ground. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all create another levels adjustment layer. And again, I'm just looking at the ground right here. I'm just going to drag that around a little bit from the left to the right until I have found something which I actually kind of like, especially for the grass. So I like how it makes the edges darker, because we had darkened them before, so it makes completely sense. Actually interesting as well what it does to the colors in the sky. And in this case, I may go for something like that. Again, I'm going to invert that by hitting Command and I, and I'm just going to paint that in a little bit, just like that, over the grass areas here. Let's just go in once, then we make sure it fades kind of nicely. Okay, that's not bad. I kind of like that already. So now I want to give the grass maybe a little bit more sharpness, but we could also give it a sharpness a bit later. But why would we? So let's just do it right now, guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a stamp visible by hitting Command, Alt, Shift, and E. And what that does, it copies everything which is visible right now onto a new layer. All right. So if this was, for example, switched off, and I would create a stamp visible, whatever is on that adjustment layer would not be visible on that stamp visible. That is not confusing at all, I think. Super easy to understand, guys. So what I'm going to do with this layer is I'm going to go to Filter and Camera Raw Filter. And once that has loaded up, I'm just going to do a simple quick, I guess it was here. What am I doing? I'm in a completely wrong window. I want to sharpen, guys. We want to sharpen right now. Please apologize. I apologize. What we are going to do instead is we're going to go to Overlay. So we're going to change the blend mode of that layer to Overlay. And we're going to go to Filter, Other, and then High Pass. Okay? And in high pass, it kind of depends on what you want to do. So I normally go for a very small radius of something like 0.3, 0.5 pixels. Let's stick with 0.3. And you see not much has happened. So if I switch it on or off, and I can even zoom in a little bit more, let's look at the rope, why not? And you see that not much has happened. So every time I duplicate that layer now by hitting Command and J on the keyboard, the image will get sharper. Okay, so I have to kind of decide when I have reached a point in which I think the sharpness is too much. So what I'll do, I'll just select all the layers I have just made which contain the sharpness information, and I'm going to hit Command and G on the keyboard, which groups them up. And now if I look at the before and after, you can definitely see a big difference. A little bit too much in the grass, but I kind of like what it does to the rope, and just the rope. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a layer mask on that whole thing, and I'm going to hit Command and I on that layer mask to hide the effect everywhere. That was a big truck, badass truck just in the background. So what I'm going to do with a brush of about 20% in the white color, I'm just going to bring that sharpness into the foreground just a little bit. And you can see here on the little thumbnail where I'm actually painting. So let's bring it down, make the brush a bit smaller. And let's just bring it back with an opacity of 40% into the area of that rope right here. I kind of like that rope. It's a nice thing. It's a rope, you know what I mean. So let's make it a bit bigger again. And with an opacity of 10%, I'll just bring that into the foreground a bit more. Okay, that's not bad. Cool. And let's give the whole thing a bit of a greater feeling, if you want, by hitting Command Alt Shift and E on the keyboard to do another one of these stamp visibles, which copies everything you can see onto a new layer. And with that, I'm going to change its blending mode from normal down to soft light. And I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I'm going to blur the soft light layer, and you see it has a different effect depending on how much you blur how much you blur the whole thing. So I'm probably going to go with something like, I'm just looking at the grass area right here, right? So maybe something like this will not look bad. Let's just have a look how it looks. Okay, so if we can see, first of all, the whole image has become a lot more vibrant, but a little bit washed in terms of texture-wise, has become a little bit more washed out. I kind of like that in the grass. So if I zoom in a little bit, just like that, it makes the grass kind of look as if it would be kind of shining, or I don't know, warmer in some way. So I like that. So let's bring it into the grass and nowhere else. And we do that by creating a layer mask again, and inverting that layer mask by hitting Command and I, and with a brush and opacity of say 50% and a white color, I'm just going to bring that effect back into the foreground where I liked it initially. Do something like that. Okay, that's not bad at all. Okay, Let's zoom out and see how that looks. That's nice. I like that. That's a kind of neat effect, I think. Okay, so what we may have to do is just reduce the saturation just a little bit, because that tends, when you do this kind of thing, it tends to oversaturate your stuff. You don't really want that, so let's just bring it down just a little bit, not too much, because I don't want to lose the effect at all. And what I'm going to do, as before, I'm going to hold Alt on my keyboard, select the layer mask I have down here, and just drag and drop it up to the hue saturation layer. It's going to ask if it wants me to replace it, and I'm like, yeah, sure, go ahead, man. And now if we zoom into the grass a little bit more, and I go switch it off and on, you can see that there is a definite reduction in saturation when it comes to the grass. Cool, that's kind of neat. So I don't think there was much more I had to do to that image. I mean, ultimately, of course, you can decide what you want to do, like how you want to continue from here. So for example, you could definitely decrease the brightness in the sky if that's what you feel like. I think in this case, like the image as it is right now would be a little bit too much, so that may not be the greatest idea. And so I'm not going to do that in this case. But also what you could do, you could create a stamp visible. So I'm going to do that. And once I have my stamp visible, I go to Filter, Blur, and then Radial Blur. I'm going to select Zoom. I'm going to set my center, as I have done it before apparently, just here approximately where the light source is supposed to be, right? And I'm going to hit OK with an amount of 10. Okay, that looks totally weird, so let's just bring it into the clouds, because it kind of simulates a movement of the clouds. So what we're going to do is going to create a layer mask, hit Command and I, as 100 times already today, and with an opacity of, let's say, 10%. And by the way, I do change my opacity just by hitting the numbers on the keyboard. Okay, so if I want an opacity of 10, I hit 1. If I want 20, I hit 2. If I want 25, I hit 2.5 quite quickly. All right, so with an opacity of 10%, I'll just bring that back into the sky ever so slightly. So we have some happy little clouds, Bob Ross reference, happy little clouds moving from or away from the light source or towards it, whatever you want to call it, right? So let's just do that. Maybe something like that, a bit more. Okay, that's not bad at all. Cool. So ultimately, probably I should have changed the colors here a little bit more, but you get the idea. Like, I mean, you can play with these colors for ages, which I did, which is why this image took actually long. The technique's super simple, but the actual processing of the colors, holy crap. I mean, you're going to come back after half an hour and check if the colors are okay, and then you're oversaturated, and you go back again. It's great fun. No, it is actually, it is. Cool, yeah, and I think that's actually all I did crazily to work on that image. There wasn't too much to do, guys. All right, let's do one more thing. Just one more thing, okay? Let's get the brush a bit bigger, like that, and just create a quick levels adjustment, and just pull that from the left to the right to something like that, and then this the opposite way. No, actually, we're going to follow it. Something like that. It's going to make the darks darker, and I kind of like that for the foreground. And also, I'm not the biggest fan of the sky where I have just created in that video, but you get the idea, right? So do not judge me on that one, I'm sorry. Okay, so now we're going to invert that by hitting Command and I, and I'm just going to bring it back with an opacity of, say, 20%, and a white color into the foreground, just like that. Just gives it a nice, natural kind of vignette feeling, just a little bit, and really gives the attention onto the kind of bright area right here, and then the rope, and then the boat, and then hopefully up in the sky. I don't even know. It should be okay. Okay. Looking good, looking good. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. If you did like the video, please do not forget to hit that thumbs up button, and also if you haven't already, subscribe. It really helps me out, and that's kind of great. If you have any questions, just feel free to drop them in a comment box below, either in the blog or in the YouTube comments, and I'm happy to reply to you as fast as I can. I thank you very much for watching, guys, and I see you the next time. Bye!